You have a unique origin story from serving as a Marine infantryman to becoming a professional dog trainer. Can you share how your military experience influenced your decision to pursue dog training as a career?
It came to me a lot later in life. I got out of the military, I think I was 22, 23.
Steven Hueston is the owner of Oracle Canine Training in Avon, Colorado, where he's been training dogs for over 12 years, working with sport dogs, family pets, and serving as a decoy for the police canine. Before launching Oracle Canine, Steven served 4 years in the United States Marine Corps as an infantry rifleman from 2006 to 2010, deploying to Iraq and other regions around the world. And in 2021, he officially founded Oracle Canine and has been hands-on with dogs ever since, constantly learning, growing, and pushing his craft forward. Steven is also the host of the Dogs of War podcast, a show that connects the military, canine, and cigar communities, and he continues to grow its reach and impact each and every day.
People will let you down, people will lead you astray. I miss that brotherhood and the camaraderie from the Marine Corps, and you're there and you have a purpose, and it helped me find that purpose again.
A lot of what we do is helping our pet clients through behavioral issues or sharpening their obedience. So if you can share a memorable success story, maybe a dog that came to you with some serious behavioral issues or aggression, and how did you help turn things around?
He came straight over to me, put his face against my belly, and just backed me up against the wall.
Before you go today, I want to invite you to stay for a song at the end of this interview, written and created by Steven himself. It's a powerful tribute to every veteran, past, present, and future, and a reminder of the courage and sacrifices that safeguard our way of life. Take a moment to listen, reflect, and honor the heroes who've given so much. You have a unique origin story from serving as a Marine infantryman to becoming a professional dog trainer. Can you share how your military experience influenced your decision to pursue dog training as a career?
Sure. Well, it came to me a lot later in life. I got out of the military, I think I was 22, 23. I did a bunch of jobs, construction, heavy equipment, et cetera, et cetera. And I always had a passion for dogs, and I was always really good with dogs. And then I was kind of thrust into it during COVID. I worked for the town here where I live, and I had done 4 years with them and wasn't planning on going anywhere. I was one of the senior guys on the crew, and with mandates and stuff like that, and my personality, I don't like to be told what to do. And I kind of got I was doing dogs on the side, and I basically was given 10 days notice before the holidays, you need to do this or you're fired. And I got fired. And um, I've always maintained the structure from the military. I'm a very structured person as far as my processes and tasks during the day. And I find kind of a benefit with training plans and training dogs. It's just kind of a correlation that works for me. And people will let you down, people will lead you astray, and I miss that brotherhood and the camaraderie from the Marine Corps. And when I show up to a client's house and their dog's just flipping out when it sees me and super excited, and it comes running up to me, and I don't know, I find something refreshing and similar to that brotherhood with the dogs. So I would say that the structure from the military plays a big part in that. And then, it's cool. I get to play with dogs and help them have better lives. And that was kind of the military. You're helping people that can't help themselves, and you're there and you have a purpose. And it helped me find that purpose again.
And a lot of veterans now are seeking out PTSD service dogs. And I think having dogs since I've been out of the military has helped me with the transition. And I'm assuming working with dogs has done the same thing for you.
Big time, big time. And, it kind of gives you that purpose every day. Every day it's something new. Even if it's the third, fourth, fifth lesson with the same client, it's different at each time. There's we're going to work on this today, or this came up. And for me, as somebody that has ADHD and my mind's just always going, always a million miles an hour, it's refreshing. It's not the same old thing every time. And that's a big help. And I definitely, my buddy Ryan, who I served with, he works for I think it's Clear Path or something. It's a nonprofit, and they raise, train, and ultimately wash out a lot of dogs that have been raised for a year in a foster's home. But and they train service dogs and they place them with veterans. And I think it's a good thing, but part of me worries about, like, I don't know, are we going to have an epidemic of worse PTSD or suicides, God forbid, or whatever, when the dog inevitably passes away? Are we preparing the veteran for when that happens? Because I know how tight I get with my dogs, and it's devastating. And I don't have my dog as a service animal. So I don't know. I think it's kind of a double-edged sword. And I don't know. I've always just kind of wondered that. I don't know if anybody's raised that issue, but it definitely makes you think.
Yeah, I don't know how other veterans would deal with it. It is very difficult and challenging when a dog passes. I mean, when my dog passed away, Hira, which I named this dog after Ari, it's Hira in reverse. That was one of the most painful things that I ever experienced.
Ever.
But shortly after she passed away, I ended up getting Ari because I needed not to necessarily replace her, but to give another dog a good home and to have that companion. And I think it's also important, being a dog trainer, to have a dog that you're
Yeah.
working with and training with. So I would hope that they would take what they've learned from the experiences with that first service dog and apply it to another dog, giving a new dog a home. And I think a service dog often has the best life because they're going out, they're spending time in different areas. They have a very unique and interesting life in comparison to a lot of normal pet dogs. And speaking of service dogs, have you done any service dog training? Do you train service dogs?
I That's kind of not my wheelhouse. I did do one dog. We tasked it with mobility. I have a elderly client who's going through cancer. She's like 90 pounds. Her balance isn't the greatest, so she had a really good dog that had zero environmental issues, was super solid, wouldn't no fear or aggression issues, etc. And we put a one of those, like, seeing eye dog rigid handles on a harness on this dog,
Mm-hmm.
and with my limited ability in the service dog world or experience, I was able to teach the dog to help her sit down, help her, if God forbid, if she fell, the dog would posture and help her get back to her
Mm-hmm.
feet. And also on a verbal, to go run to the closest person and, like, get their attention, take them back, and then that way somebody could get help. But that's pretty much it.
Yeah, but I mean, as you said earlier, that something that you took away from being in the military, and as of course you know, I also served in the Marine Corps as infantry as well. I was an 0331 machine gunner. You were 0311 rifleman.
Sure.
And there is a lot of structure and discipline that we take from that. And something that I find interesting about dog training is that we can create a structured approach to working with dogs. And something I tell all my clients, it doesn't matter if I'm training a protection dog, search and rescue dog, service dog, pet obedience. The process is always the same, and we adjust each step according to the goals. So if we're working a service dog and we're doing something like counter support or counterbalance, instead of teaching a dog to go with the pressure, we reward them for resisting the pressure. But the process is the same. We have to find the exact moment the dog does the behavior we want, and then we capture it. Same thing with doing things like retrieve. And you've trained in the sport of IGP Schutzen. And what's one of the exercises that they do in that sport
It's
that is
dumbbell.
often retrieval training? Same thing. You can take the retrieval training that you learn in a sport like Schutzen, IGP, and you can do the very similar process for a service dog. Through Dogs of War, you've had incredible guests, from Navy SEAL handlers like Will Chesney to legendary trainers like Armin Winkler. What's one of the most powerful lessons you learned from those conversations that still impact how you train today?
It's a good question. Well, I would say part of it is don't just believe what you see on the internet. There's some people that are really, really good at having flashy social media and huge names in the industry and whatnot. In the beginning with my new dog Cairo, which is named after Will Chesney's dog, who was on the Osama bin Laden raid. So it was really cool to having him on the podcast and sharing that with him. I kind of did the ping pong thing in the beginning, going to this seminar, going to that seminar, going to this, that, and mixing styles from different people or programs from different people. It's not necessarily the best thing. And I definitely caused some problems with my dog. And he's not a sport dog at all. I prefer to do actual protection and real life man work. And funny enough, Armin, who's my main mentor, I went out to his place a couple years ago, and Cairo was kind of taught to bark to get the bite, right? Like you would see in IGP or PSA. And he's a space cadet, and sometimes he's a little bit hyper and he overstimulates. And Armin got in front of him. We started with the sleeve. He's like, I know he's on a suit. I just want to start with the sleeve, kind of see where he's at. As soon as he got in front of him, Cairo's just, and you could see him in his brain. He's frantic. And Armin was like, dude, what's your dog doing right now? I said, well, that's what he was taught to do to get the bite, And he's like, but what is it? He's like, that's not aggression. That's tiring him out. He's at an 11 out of 10 right now. He can't think. And he's like, think about like what we do in the real world. He's like, if we jump out of a aircraft at night under night vision, pull low, jumping high, and then they patrol in like 10 clicks, they can't have their dog at the front door of the bad guy's compound making noise and leaking like that. A, it's making them tired. B, can't think. C, the bad guys are going to know right where you guys are, and that's like super dangerous for them. And watching how he kind of worked through that, where other trainers would have put an e-collar on him and stemmed him to be quiet, you know what I'm saying, or using positive punishment or pressure. Armin just stood there, and it took a while. My ears were ringing really bad because Cairo was just barking. And the second he shut up for just a brief moment, man, Armin flinched, whack. Cairo got the bite, and then it was like night and day in the dog. Like next time I brought him in, he was quiet. I was able to down him, and Armin was like, when he's biting me hard. He's like, if we were to use pressure to shut this down and to work on the drive leaking or whatever you want to call it, you're going to kind of take some of their soul away. And when they hit the bad guy, it's not going to be with ill intent and the pressure and the firm bite like you want, And I don't know. That was a really big takeaway, that sometimes waiting and timing is better than using a tool and pressure. And that's just something that I really took away from that, and I've carried kind of forward.
Timing is incredibly important. What are some of the things that you've seen besides what you just mentioned as far as differences when it comes to most sport protection dogs in comparison to dogs that do the actual work?
Well, in sport, the sleeve is basically, in my opinion, it's a tennis ball or it's a tug toy, and they're not actually wanting to. Yeah, so that dog wants to F up that human personally, and if he had gear on or if he had no gear on. That's kind of like what I see with the real dogs, the police dogs, the military dogs that I got to be around and see when I was out at Armin's place. Like they're coming in with ill intent, and if you mess up and you put something in the wrong spot, like they're gonna take it, right? Or a sport dog's gonna target the bicep or the forearm or the leg, whatever sport you're doing. And a lot of people train the real dogs with a lot of pressure, and they put the dog into defense a lot. Like they'll beat the shit out of them with a whip. They'll put a lot of pressure on the dog to try and bring out that like aggression or whatever you want to call it. Where I kind of learned from Armin, he uses frustration to do that. Defense and that kind of work obviously is a part of it, but it's not the foundation for making those dogs bite people for real. It's more based on the frustration with holding bites and there's this whole process, man. I listened to Armin for like 10 minutes give this whole process about how he'll get up in a tree and send the dog on an area search, and the dog alerts, and he'll be just hanging low enough with a shirt or something where the dog can just barely get some cloth in its mouth, right? And then that dog's pissed, and you put it up, and he just kind of went through this whole progression. And I was like, my God, dude, that's brilliant, right? Like, obviously, the dog being able to take punches and kicks and, whatever is part of it, but it's not the foundation of it. And I don't know, it was pretty eye opening. I thought it was really neat.
What are some of the ways that you've seen or some of the things that you've done in your training that can take a dog to a point where you're pretty confident that if that dog is sent into a live bite, that the dog's going to do its job and not avoid biting because it doesn't see any gear?
Well, you know, um, I could just kind of speak on what I saw when I was out in Virginia, because I personally don't do a whole lot of that. I mean, I'm involved with it on a certain level. I'm still learning. I'm still kind of searching, that stuff out. But I would say the most effective thing that I've heard and been around and saw, is using that frustration and getting that dog in the mindset of, oh, I just want to blast this person, regardless if they have gear on. Right now, there's a place for shedding drills and things like that. However, I don't know. In my limited opinion, I would say a lot of that stuff just looks good on camera and doesn't really translate to that switch flipping in the dog's brain, right? Where I've seen it definitely happen using the frustration, and then you overlay in the defensive stuff. You teach the dog how to accept pressure and how to defeat pressure, and then you do, the passive work. I think has a definite place in that, where you're not engaging the dog in prey drive, and you're teaching the dog to just smoke the first person he sees wherever he sees, versus somebody standing there and getting the dog. Because like, even if you go in and you let the dog bite the sleeve and you slip it, and then you're doing all this movement stuff and the dog's coming at you, the dog is still engaging, in my opinion, in prey drive, right? Where it needs to be a totally different place inside of the dog's head for it to have ill intent. You know what I mean?
If you don't mind, I want to go back to the PTSD conversation that we were having with veterans. And as a veteran, do you find that working with dogs has a therapeutic or grounding effect for yourself or for others? So, have you seen firsthand how dogs help veterans or first responders heal from trauma or find purpose again?
100%. My wife's a mental health therapist, and she specifically works with veterans and like some athletes, professional athlete. I mean, it's kind of a mix of people. And through conversations with her, she can't really just talk about much, obviously due to HIPAA restrictions and whatnot. But a couple times, she's asked if she could take my Malinois to work with her. And there's somebody in there, they really like dogs, and I've actually gone up there and taken the dog with me, and just seeing somebody who, like, I don't know anything about them, I don't know their name. They've obviously agreed to me being there in my presence, and you know, um, watching the change in them from when the dog comes in and they get to interact with him. And then, yeah, I remember this one time, the client, I let him drive my dog. I was like, hey, come over here, be assertive. Here's his command. Here's what you do. And I gave him his little tug toy, and watching somebody who was just like having one of the worst days of their life, take control of this 80, 70 something pound Malinois, who he's a strong dog, and watching their eyes light up when he's doing healing and like going between their legs and downing in motion and then throwing the ball. It definitely has its place, 100%. I think dogs, the energy and the vibration, or whatever you want to call it, that comes from dogs is always in a good place typically, or you're not using the right dog for the job. I mean, I know some dogs that you would definitely not want to do that with, but if it's the right dog, there's no way that that person's not going to get cheered up. It just can't happen, man. The dog's there. The dog doesn't ask you to do anything, but the dog gives. They give you themselves and their soul, and I think sometimes that's a very needed and what's the word? Thoughtful mode of therapy for people. 100%.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. my dog Ari, I've had lots of different people do some healing with her and spin command and have her weave through their legs. And every time they're doing a focused heal, their eyes, just like you said, they
Yeah.
light up, they get really wide, they can't believe it. She's looking up at them doing that focused heal. She doesn't do the prance, but she does do a pretty decent
Yeah.
focused heal. Could you share a memorable success story? I want to talk about the actual training side, since a lot of what we do is helping our pet clients through behavioral issues or sharpening their obedience. So, if you can share a memorable success story, maybe a dog that came to you with some serious behavioral issues or aggression, and how did you help turn things around?
So I worked with this dog named Dobby a few years ago. He was one of my clients in the beginning, and he's a Dogo Argentino, full-blooded, like 100-pound beast. And I learned a lot from this particular incident because I met the client. I always meet the client outside. I say, leave the dog inside. I meet him outside. I park. I get my treat bag. I get all my stuff. And we have a conversation about their dog. And, I didn't ask if the dog had a bite history. I later found out that he did. And, we have this conversation. So Dobby's a 90 or 100-pound beast and very fearful of strangers. He's a little bit fearful of other dogs. He'll start to react in the form of barking, growling, lunging when he would see another dog. I don't really like to use the term reactivity, but he definitely had some fear that would prompt these behaviors that were undesirable. So we go in, and the owner's she was a younger female, probably mid 20s, and Dobby was in a crate, a wire crate, and he's just like in total defense, can't go anywhere, deep bark, low, grumbling. And I told her to let him out and grab him, and so she let him out, and he slipped by her, and the dog didn't even have a collar on, man, and he came straight over to me, put his face against my belly, and just backed me up against the wall. And I had just had this chick on my podcast that had been attacked by a dogo, and she shared these pictures, and it looked like a shark attack. And it was just that was in my head. And like I said, I learned a lot from this. This is one of my first, OG clients in the beginning, but he backed me up against the wall, and I kind of went super neutral. I brought my arms over in front of my body, and I said, "Hey, let's put a collar on him and a leash, and let's go outside." And she was able to back him off of me, put a collar on him, put a leash on him, and we went outside. And I think we did 4 or 5 lessons, and he did a complete turnaround. I've got videos of me healing this dog at a concert in town, and like somebody's pushing a baby stroller with a kid in it, and it like almost ran into him, and he just kind of went around it, stayed in a heel. We're walking through the crowd, doing all this stuff. I even dropped his leash at one point, and he was dragging it on the ground. And building this dog's confidence and working thresholds, a lot of positive reinforcement with food and play at threshold distance from stuff, and then being able to close them. But I think the biggest thing was building the handler, the owner's confidence. She was not confident with this dog. She was scared of this dog, and they kind of vibed off of each other like that, and it caused a lot of problems. But she has since moved to Puerto Rico, and she every once in a while, every couple months, she'll send me a video of Dobby on a crowded beach, running around off leash, chasing a stick into the water, coming back, dogs walking by him, running by him, and she's able to control him off leash, and that was just super rewarding. But I definitely learned a lot. I before I even go in, I say, hey, make sure you leave the dog inside. And then before we finish talking and go in, I said, usually there's two people, to a husband and wife situation, and I'll send the wife or one of them in, put the dog on a leash, put the dog on a collar, go back in the back of your house. Don't be crowding the front door. Don't make it weird, but just go back, and the dog's restrained. And I ask if there's a bite history, yada, yada, yada. So it kind of taught me a lot as far as things that I need to do preemptively. But it also kind of, everybody has those, what's the word, imposter syndrome moments. Like
Mm.
Am I really a trainer? Am I really doing this? Am I really doing good? And that was like the first big one for me, because it was all everything that I did, and the client obviously put the work in, but it was all things that I had come out of my brain, and it was right on so many levels.
And what was the cause of the reactivity?
Mostly fear, and the dog like lived in an apartment complex with a lot of people, a lot of multi like 4 or 5 people households, and didn't wasn't getting exercised, wasn't getting his mental stimulation out that he needed to do, and it was all fear based, because once we built confidence in the dog and we taught him leash manners, and we started rewarding him for good behaviors, and really incorporating a lot of play at thresholds and impulse control. Like we did a lot of impulse control stuff because he was very ball motivated, toy motivated, and teaching him like mixing in obedience off leash, making him hold it sit or hold it down while we throw his favorite ball in the world, and things like that. But I definitely think most of it stemmed from fear, and not having his needs as a dogo argentino, a hunting dog that's supposed to be in a pack in the woods off leash, killing other animals. Those needs weren't being met. So I taught her flirt pole. We started incorporating a lot of flirt pole, a lot of rag work. We started doing scented drags. You got some training odors off the internet. We got like some rabbit odor, I think, and some like pig or wild boar type odor. And we would scent up a rag, go drag it through this field up, and then I'd be like, "Go get your dog," and she'd bring him out, and you'd see his head snap as soon as he got like on where the the drag started, and he'd do this whole thing and get to the end, and man, he'd just start thrashing this thing, and we'd play tug with him, and just like it just kind of clicked for him once they were meeting his genetic, like I got these itches that need to be scratched, and teaching him, hey dude, it's okay to be around other dogs, and this is the way you need to act. And then we overlaid training collars, pinch collar, e-collar, etc., and using punishment at the very tail end, and it kind of all came together.
And so was he territorial? Because you said when you first came in, and his response
Yeah,
to you being present in the area was to corner you up against the wall, which
yeah,
seems a little bit different than fear, but it does make me think about the possibility of what I like to call a forward fearful aggression, where the dog may be afraid, but they decide to take out the threat instead of retreating from it.
well, and we all see dogs that they're not like man eaters or aggressive dogs, socially aggressive dogs, but they've learned that I'm uncomfortable with strangers, especially in my house. That's the first thing that I said was, let's go outside, right? So that was definitely part of it. But they learned that if I'm scared of this person or I'm scared of this dog, I can create space by posturing, growling, biting. Like, because if he wanted to bite me, he would have bit me. You know what I mean? He was off leash. I didn't have any protection. You know, but I feel like there's a history of this learned behavior of I can create space from something that I'm scared of by doing these behaviors. But like the growling and the vocalizing, to me,
Mm.
even though we're in the house, was coming from a place of fear. And I,
It sounds like what I call bluffing, where a dog learns. So this is associative learning. The dog learns certain things, creates a certain response, and so they continue to do that behavior, but they're not the actual type of dog that's going to follow through with the bite. Now, of course, some dogs will, and in fact, many dogs will if they're pushed to a point and we cross that line, then they're going to bite. So of
of
course we
course.
don't want to do that. And just like you said, you learn from your mistakes. I had something very similar. Now, when I work with dogs that are people aggressive, because of course there's lots of different types of aggression: resource guarding aggression, redirected aggression, frustration aggression. Now I always meet them in a neutral environment. I had a client who had a dog that, I don't know if this dog would have bitten me, but I came into the house, very similar to your story, and we walk in, and there's a small living room, and then there's a hallway. And then the very last room in that hallway, the dog comes cruising around the corner. and it looked vicious and it was running straight towards me. And luckily, someone was in the room that was closest to the living room and they stepped out and blocked the dog. Now, I ended up doing a stay and train with that dog, and there really wasn't any issues. It was mostly the territorial behavior that we were seeing inside of the home. But once I got the dog to the house and I got him in my house and took the dog out of the crate and spent some time bonding, hanging out with the dog, I mean, you couldn't even tell once the dog was outside of that environment. When working with dogs that are people aggressive, do you mostly instruct the owners what to do, or do you take them and you do a stay and train where they're away from their owners?
I've done both. I've only done one stay and train with a people aggressive dog, simply because I don't have a facility, and I do the majority of my program is private lessons. So for a
Mm-hmm.
dog to be able to come and live with me in my house, around my wife, around my dog, I try not to take that on right now. Now, one day I'll have a facility, and absolutely, I would rather me take the dog for a period of time and then bring the owner in a couple times a week. They got to be involved, in my opinion. But building good habits and kind of changing those learned behaviors and habits aside from the owner, I think definitely has its place, because I see it. I work with this female mix right now from the shelter. Apparently, the shelter didn't disclose about this dog's fear and the barking and growling and posturing when it sees other dogs and other people, and it's pretty extreme. But I've literally, like, I watched the owners do it, and you could see a shift in the dog as soon as the leash is in their hands versus, like, so they like to go to this brewery, and there's a brewery dog, and the brewery dog's off leash, and it'll run right up to your dog and invade its space. And with them, they were like, this is one of our biggest goals, is to be able to come to this brewery, have our dog with us, blah blah blah. So I had to do the, hey, like, you guys got to manage your expectations. This might not be the brewery dog, but we can meet here, we'll try it. And so I met him. I ragged the dog for a little bit in the parking lot, did some obedience, got her head into, all right, we're doing this stuff, cool. And then I took the dog in aside from the owners, and there was like four dogs in there, and I walked right by them. Two of them came around the bar stool, came right up to her. I just kept her moving, and she didn't bark, she didn't growl, she didn't do a thing. And then I brought the owners in, and I gave them the leash, and I said, sit over here in the corner, kind of, if she looks at one of these other dogs and she doesn't bark or growl, start your food rewards. You can even pull out your toy and start playing with her. And just like, I saw the shift happen in the dog. It's like she went back to, okay, I'm with these people, and there's all this history of social pressure of being put into these situations and barking. And at a certain point, it's almost like some of these dogs, like, they become like, the it switches from a place of fear to, oh, this is fun, and my needs aren't being met at home, and now I'm just going to do this stuff because it's almost like it's addictive. I hate to use that word, but it's kind of that way. And I don't know. That's something that I kind of commonly see, is when the dog is with the owners, that they have the history of all these problems, they kind of revert back to those things that they've been doing. But when I take the leash and I remove the owners from the situation, I'm able to start building good associations and good habits in those situations. So it's kind of weird. I think it needs to be a mix of both.
Right, I get what you're saying. And something I think is important to point out, because there are a lot of dog trainers or people that are aspiring to be dog trainers that listen to this podcast. And if there's a certain type of dog that someone likes to work with, I mean, there's all kinds of dogs out there that the owners want to sharpen their obedience, or the owners have puppies that they need training and they want to do puppy imprinting, or they have dogs that they want to train for rally or some sort of competition obedience. So that's the really nice thing about this profession, is you can choose the dogs that you want to work with. And thank goodness we have trainers out there that really enjoy working with these extreme cases. I had a trainer, really excellent trainer on my podcast, I think a couple months ago now, Stephanie Vinchinsky from Method Canine, and that's what they specialize in, is all dog aggression cases, whether it's dog on dog aggression, people aggression, they get the most extreme cases. And I think to myself, I'm so glad that you guys do that, because I'm the guy who likes to work with puppies. I like to work with the happy go lucky golden retrievers. Will I help someone with an aggression case or a fearful case or some of these other extreme issues? Yeah, of course I will. But I really enjoy the puppies. So if I can get puppies all day, let's do that. And that's something that's nice about being a dog trainer, is you can market for those types of clients that you want to get. Just like myself, you're also known as a balance trainer. Can you paint a picture for us of what balance training actually looks like in action? Let's say you're teaching a basic command like a down, or just basic obedience in general. What are your steps? What tools or cues are you using? And how do you determine when the behavior is truly learned?
Well, in my opinion, a balance trainer is a trainer that has the ability to do any and all of the training methods and learning psychologies that are out there, right? We all know the purely positive or force free crowd. They're basically limited to rewarding a dog, and they're actually using punishment and they don't even realize it when they withhold reward or whatever it is,
Or yell at the dog?
or raise your voice or your posture, I think balance training. So in the context of teaching it down, if I have a younger dog, I typically don't like to use positive punishment. In the context of teaching it down, I will usually start with luring, and I will lure in the beginning. I'll teach the dog to follow my hand with food in it. Very quickly, I move to no food in the hand, and I build up to where the dog will follow my hand, at a decent distance, maybe 15, 20 paces. I can put him into a sit, etc. Usually, I'll start the down from the dog being in a sit, and if I could elevate the dog, like put him on a platform or a table or stairs at like a level of the top of a stair, and I can go down a few stairs so I don't have to bend all the way down to the ground. I find that kind of helps easier, but I'll lure the dog down, and I'm pretty good at getting the dog to go down, and like using a little bit of push and pull, super subtle, to get them to settle into the down. Now, if it's a dog that's not going into a down, like a Frenchies are, I don't know about you, but for me, they're notorious for popping their butt up when you go down. And then I kind of go to successive approximation, I guess you would call it, where like if I get elbow 3/4 of the way down and the other elbow's up, I'll reward that. And then I'll slowly work until I get the dog into a down. Then this is where the balance part comes in. Usually I will teach the dog a cue with leash pressure to go down, right? So I'll pull the leash down. I'll help them with luring. I'll fade the lure away. Then I have just leash pressure cue. And then I'll start introducing a verbal command either prior to the leash cue or prior to the hand signal to go down. And I've started kind of doing this thing where I'll kind of like buck a little bit, like I'll flinch as I do the hand signal. And I find that helps me kind of fade the hand signal away easier, because I can go to where I just kind of put my hand up and I'll kind of flinch when I say down, and the dogs will do it. And then you can kind of get that hand out of there quicker. But using leash pressure, using reward, also removing reward once I get to that verbal command stage and I know the dog's proficient with the verbal command, then if they don't do it, I will remove the reward, right? So that's 2 or 3 different learning psychologies from operant conditioning and, eventually classical conditioning. So I think that's kind of like my run through on how I would do the down, but I use classical conditioning, right? I use a condition reinforcer like a yes or a clicker. And then I build the down and the association to the hand signal. And then I will also withhold reward. I'll use leash pressure. And then eventually I'll go to positive punishment. If the dog doesn't down on command, I'll give them a, pinch collar pop, tap, tap, tap on the e-collar, etc. So you kind of cover the spectrum of training techniques and learning psychologies.
Now, a lot of dog owners struggle with that whole my dog is great at home, but can't perform outside or loses it outside. It's the case where they tell their dog to do something, the dog doesn't do it, and then this. It's like, no, the dog doesn't know it, right? Not in that context. In your system, how do you desensitize a dog to those outside triggers? And how do you make sure the progress actually transfers to a normal walk?
So my private lesson kind of deal is I do a package of lessons, and we kind of take care of everything up front. I get the person entered in. I kind of take some notes. They do their intake forms, and then when I show up, the first, depending on the dog, right? This is all relevant to the dog that's in front of you, but depending on the dog, on a normal dog who doesn't have a whole lot of behavioral issues, etc., the first 2 to 3 lessons I do inside of their home, and the first lesson or two, aside from the evaluation portion of the first lesson, right? Um, it's all in the home. We may go out, we may go for a walk, we may just stay in the driveway. It just depends on where they live. It depends on the dog. But I hear it every day. Oh, I just need to work on this, right? I had a client. She said her dog, when she gives it a bone, she brings the dog to work, and it's in a salon, and a lot of times dogs will walk by outside of the salon. When there's a bone or when there's something of value to the dog, she's getting a little growly. She's kind of guarding that object or resource in the dog's mind. Where I show up, and the person can't even walk the dog on a leash. It's like spinning, circling while we're talking. She's passing the leash around her 2, 3, 4 times. The dog's circling, hooking the back of my legs. And I'm like, all right, well, we got a lot more to work on here than just that. But um, I like to start inside of the house. And then it's the same when people say, oh, my dog knows X, Y, and Z. And I'll back up. I say, all right, put your dog in it down. And you'll see them down, down, and then they do the whole thing, the hand signal, and the dog may do it, it may not do it, right? So sometimes you get lucky and the dog will actually sit naturally down, but then when we go outside, now there's all these different distractions. These folks may have not built a good engagement with the dog, so the dog doesn't even. As soon as we go outside, the dog checks out. Now it's getting everything from the environment. It's not even doesn't give a shit about the owner. So basically, we start inside. I'll teach them how to do a sit. I'll teach them how to do a down. I start shaping recall. I start having them walk me around their living room like a dog on the leash and introducing leash pressure and turns. And then I have them practice with the dog. And then I have certain goals that they need to meet each week. And then we start slowly moving out into more distracting environments. And every time, like, a dog's looking like a rock star inside, that's goal 1, first week, and a sit and a down. Then we go outside, we go out front, and I always have to manage their expectations. I'm like, hey, your dog's not going to be as quick. It's not going to be as crisp. The dog's probably not going to sit perfectly straight next to you. That's fine. We can clean that up later. Then we start getting, the behaviors that we want. And then we start kind of raising our expectations in that new distracting environment. And then we move to the next one. And then we move to the next one. And then we move to the next one. So I start going to parks. I start going to shopping centers. We have 2 world-class ski areas where they call them the villages. And it's just people, dogs galore, people carrying skis, escalators. When they're performing in those environments and they're sitting the first time, they're downing, we're able to put a long line on the dog and get a couple good, crisp recalls. At that point, that's when we start to introduce corrections, etc. And then we really start getting to the meat and the potatoes of the stuff. But now we're in this, like, if being inside's a 1, now we're at the Vale Village and we're at like a 9 as far as tons of people, tons of dogs, tons of sounds. And we kind of incrementally work our way into those environments. And if people need to take longer, they need to take longer. Not everybody has the ability to be a dog trainer. And, we have to kind of just tailor that part. A big part of my program is we move at their speed. I've got people that have done a package of 5 1-hour lessons and they got the basics down. I've got other people that are on their second and third package because they don't have the timing. They don't have the knowledge or the ability to apply what they're being shown, So it's kind of like not one size fits all, and I kind of tailor it to the dog and to the person, and we just go at their pace, you know.
Yeah, I like that you use the number scale using the 1 and the 9 as an example because I do a number scale as well when it comes to the environments. How do you know or how do you teach your clients when it's time or when the dog is ready for implementing any sort of pressure or correction? Are there certain milestones that you look for? Like, okay, the dog's responding this amount of times, we got this percentage. What sort of signals are you looking for to progress in that manner?
I guess if I had to put a number to it, I would like to be at that like 75, 80% at least for recall, for sit, for down, and a down from standing, a down from sitting, a sit from down, um, you know, in those contexts. So obedience positions. That's kind of like where I want to see that, but in a 7, 8, 9 level of environment, because then you know that the dog kind of understands and grasps enough to the point where it's fair, in my opinion, to use punishment.
Hmm.
Now, I start punishment a lot sooner for healing and leash walking, right? I don't think the average person that works a 9 to 5 and, whatever has the time, ability, skill to teach healing by doing luring only and the amount of time, because they have to go out every day and go for walks, and a lot of times where we live, from right now until the end of April, sometimes into May, we got 5, 6 foot of snow on the ground. I've had people get dragged down by their dogs and break their collarbone, you know what I'm saying, before they called me. So, and it might not be as fair to the dog. However, it's a safety concern at this point. So I start using leash pressure collars, etc., a lot sooner. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm still like, hey, you need to be luring your dog around the house. You need to be getting them familiar with the heel command, doing the figure eights and the turns and whatnot. But pretty quickly for non-obedience commands, I would say very quickly by like the second lesson, I'm like, hey, I show them a pinch collar. I have them put it around my neck and pull on it. I have them put it around their thigh and pull on it, and I'm like, listen, your dog's got an inch of fur, fat, skin. Like, this does not hurt them, but we need to kind of go to this. And then most dogs that I work with, very quickly, they respond pretty well to, at least a pinch collar, some corrections, a lot of food. Like, I use a lot of food when I'm doing leash walking in the beginning, because I am using pressure kind of soon, right? So I use a lot of food, a lot of positive reinforcement, a lot of play, and then we've kind of fade that away. I say, like, usually by the third or fourth lesson, I'll say, you need to get into the mindset now. You're not rewarding 100% for every little thing when you're leash walking. Now your dog has to start doing more for less. And by that time, usually I'll get Cairo out and I'll show them. I'm like, this is like how far you guys need to get without using food and play every little thing. And I'll do like 5-10 minutes of obedience, healing, etc. And I think seeing it with somebody else kind of helps solidify that removal of the food, because that, to me, that's one of the most challenging things of training with food, is knowing when to remove it or when to start spacing it out.
Do you try to remove it entirely or do you just
No,
keep it at this spaced out portion?
I personally, with the dogs that I work with, I think it would be, to me, it's like if I got to grab a treat bag and have food on my body in case my dog walks by a pack of dogs and he ignores them and he's checking in with me and he's not pulling. I think that, I'll reward my dog for that. I don't know how everybody else feels, but I think me and you don't work for free. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So I think it's fair to be able to have the ability to reward, um, and not have to use it. But I'm still like, my dog's 5 years old. I was in Home Depot the other day, and the store manager is a friend of mine, and I have his permission. Like, my dog can climb the stairs, the big ladder stairs, and he was doing that. He went all the way up to the top of the big, like, 10 foot tall stairs. And there's like three dogs that are all barking and and like, he didn't even look over at him once. He's just doing his thing. And with me, he came down, I whipped down his toy. We played tug. I do kind of like to with the right dog, fade the food away to a toy reward if it's the right dog. But a lot of the dogs I work with, they're a couple years old already, and the people didn't build any toy motivation, and they could care less, or they don't have the skill to get the dog going and to play. So I tell them, look, there's nothing wrong. Before you called me, you couldn't walk your dog down the street because it's barking and lunging at everything that's passing. Now he can walk by and get by all of that. Why not? Why not kick him a bone every now and then?
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree with you completely. It's one of the things that frustrates me when people say things like, oh, I don't want to bribe my dog. And this is something I've talked about on other podcasts as well. Because when we look at the different types of reinforcement schedules, the most common is the continuous, when we're rewarding every single correct behavior, and then when we switch to variable. Now, there's other different types of reinforcement schedule, but one of the reasons why we put most behaviors on the variable reinforcement schedule, this is that random sort of reward schedule, is there's two main reasons, and there's science behind this. I saw a presentation from a professor. I can't recall his name right now, but he was talking about how they were looking at dopamine when it comes to behaviors with chimps. And it's the same with dogs, it's the same with humans. When there's a signal that lets the chimp know there's a possibility for a reward, when it's on a continuous reinforcement schedule, that's when you see the dopamine go up. So it goes up at the signal, and then it goes down when they actually get the reward. So the dopamine isn't the chemical when they get the reward, it's the chemical that produces the motivation to do the behavior to get to the reward. And what they found when they switched to a variable reinforcement schedule, and they kept it roughly at about 50%. So 50% of the time, the chimp was getting rewarded or was receiving a reward, but it wasn't like a predictable pattern. It wasn't it wasn't reward no reward, reward no reward, because of course they would figure that out. It had to be randomized. When the chimp saw or had the signal for the possibility of the reward, the dopamine, I believe, doubled. So it increased the amount of motivation for the behavior. Now, why do we switch to a variable reinforcement schedule? Well, that's one. Often it increases more motivation, but it's the strongest against extinction of the behavior. But it doesn't mean that the behavior will never go extinct if we stop rewarding, right? They have the slot machines in the casinos. That's the most common analogy on the variable reinforcement schedule, because that's what keeps people pulling the lever. Sometimes you get big rewards, sometimes you get really small ones, but it keeps you pulling. Nobody's going to stay on a slot machine if it stops rewarding entirely. And so if we stop giving our dogs any kind of reward, we're not praising them, we're not petting them, we're not playing with them with toys or food, those behaviors will go away, and our only option at that point will be force. So I really like that you said that. And with the proofing in the different environments, if the dog makes a mistake, do you start with pressure or do you go right to a correction? So, for example, you're working on a stay, you've done a good amount of stays, it's progressing really nicely, and the dog starts to make some mistakes. Do you say, okay, we're going to do pressure first, or this dog knows it, I'm ready for correction? Or how do you determine when the dog is ready for correction for something like breaking a stay?
Let me come back to that. I want to say one more thing on the what you had just said.
Oh, of course.
Part of the reason why I like to go to a variable reward schedule or system or whatever is because uh, I've seen people who overly reward for everything, and then one day they forget their treat bag, and we're somewhere where the dog's at an 8 or a 9 distraction level wise, and they can't even get the dog to lure into a position sometimes because the dog knows they don't have anything for them, right? So I think it's very important to go to that randomized, and I've also heard people say that the thought of being rewarded is just as powerful as the reward itself. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to add that in, but
that's a good point too. I actually want to add to it now as
go
well.
for it. Yeah.
Because this is something I was talking about on a lesson recently. Dogs are also incredibly situational, bouncing off of what you just said. If the dog learns in this situation, in this environment, my owner doesn't ever give me any rewards, in that environment, the obedience becomes less reliable.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just they stop rewarding, or if they don't reward, as you said, in certain areas. So I think that was a really excellent point.
Yes, it's just something that I've kind of noticed, and I seen that in the beginning. That's why when I talked about luring, where the very first session of teaching them to follow my hand, I have food in my hand, but very quickly I go to where I don't have food in my hand, and then I get really good results of the dog following my hand, because you'll see people that always lure with food in their hand. Then when they don't have that food in their hand, the dog's like, hey, I'm not doing it. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So, um, I to go back to the question, um, which I'm having a brain fart. What's the question again? Remind me.
It was the one about the corrections or
Got
the
it. Got it.
pressure with the dog
Yes.
breaking the stay in different
Yep.
environments.
So, depending on the dog, a lot of times I'll say, hey, today when we practice the sit stay or the down stay, uh, we're going to give him two mess ups, right? He can get up twice. We're just going to, come on, come on. We're going to turn him, put him back where he was. And I'll do that a couple times, right? With a dog that I know is pretty proficient in this, then if they do it a third time, I'm going to use pressure, right? I'm still going to reward them, not for putting their butt back on the ground, but for holding their butt on the ground after that. I don't like to reward a dog. They break, you correct, use pressure, etc., whatever it is, they put their butt on the ground. I don't like to reward that. I like to
Hmm.
wait 10, 20, 30 seconds and then reward for them holding their butt on the ground, because I've seen dogs that they're really smart,
Hmm.
and they'll be like, oh, my ass is off the ground, it's back down, give me a treat. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So
Yep. That's that reinforcement loop.
yep. I like to give the dog a chance or two before I go to pressure, most of the time. With my dog, if he does it, he gets correction right away. But that's because I know that I literally train this dog every single day, and I have for 5 years. So I know that he knows it, right? But sometimes we can't plan for contingencies. Like, we have elk, we have bear, we have moose, we have deer, but they never show up when you want them to, right? It's not like, hey, I'm going to be training down at the park 5:15, bring your family by, right? So if it's something like that with my dog, I'll give him a chance, but then I go right to pressure.
Yeah, that's funny. The elk one. It's one of those things where when you have a client that's having issues with their dog being reactive on leash, and you've done some training, and they want to go out and see if it's working, or they want to find the trigger, and then for some reason you can't find the trigger anywhere. You walk the neighborhood 5, 6 times. I'm not seeing anyone. And what's the client saying? There's always people
Always
out.
people.
There's always dogs.
It's the same thing when
But
your
for
car
some
has an
reason,
issue. You go to the mechanic, and the mechanic test drives it, and he's like, it's not doing anything, dude.
yeah, exactly. Now, I'm assuming you use condition punishers or markers for positive punishment. So when you said adding pressure, were you talking about using some kind of leash pressure, or were you talking about like a leash pop or a stim on a remote training collar? And speaking of, do you use remote training collars?
Yes, I don't use them with everybody. Some of my clients are older, and there's no way the timing,
Mm-hmm.
and I could see that going terribly wrong. And I if I had my way, 100% of everybody I work with, we would have a conditioned punisher word, right? Sometimes I don't, but with my dog, I do. If I say the word no, that means correction is coming, and I always
Mm-hmm.
follow that up with correction, right? Because I feel like if you make that word a conditioned punishment cue, and then you don't follow it up with punishment over time, like, it's going to lose its value, right? It's the same thing I hear clients saying
Yep.
yes, and they don't give the dog. I'm like, if you say that, you have to give the dog a reward, right? So um, it kind of depends on the dog and the person. But if I had my way, and based off of what my mentors have taught me, yes, I would 100% do that with everybody. I'm trying to think of the reason why I don't with some people. It's just some people, and I hate to say this, but some people don't have a whole lot going on up here. And, now we got a continuation marker, we have a terminal marker. It's just a lot for some
Mm-hmm.
people. You know what I'm saying? And I just find it easier to for them, not so much the dog. The dog would benefit from having that word, or that cue that punishment may happen, and a cue that punishment will happen. But I think that's a lot for some people. It truly is.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Have you studied any of Nino's work from STS Canine?
I haven't studied it. I know who he is.
Yeah, I bring him up because I have his MVP program. It's a massive program, and I have the utmost respect for him. I think he's a phenomenal dog trainer, fantastic tactician. He just executes so well. But one of the things that I picked up from the course and that I've changed my approach to teaching students and clients is really breaking down, and this goes off what you were just saying, really breaking down every single thing within the training process into single steps. So, one of the first
Mm,
things that I do with everybody, as well as the dogs that I work with, is engagement training, which you're familiar with. We get the dog to look at us, we mark, and then we enter a reward event. Well, what I've noticed is that when a client is just learning this, one, they're learning, okay, I'm going to use a sound that's going to predict a reward. I have to use this sound the moment that the dog looks at me. I have to separate the sound from the delivery of the reward to make sure I'm not overshadowing to where the dog's not. And it's just too much. And so what happens is the dog looks at them, they're thinking all the things in their head, and either they take too long or they pair the
looks
movement. So
away.
now they're overshadowing. The dog checks out. And so I now it's like, okay, first thing is just build a reward event. Get your dog to look at you and then enter a reward event. Don't worry about the marker yet. And then once they get good at that, okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to add the single marker before it. So that's helped quite a bit.
Mm,
And I continue to try to figure out ways to simplify it. I had an interview with Robert Cabral, another really excellent trainer. And this is from him, I picked up what he calls the binary dog. Have you heard of it?
no, no.
So it's just he just called it like the yes no system,
Okay.
right? So an exercise that I've started to incorporate now with clients is inside the house when they're practicing the binary dog, not using no for correction in the beginning, because as you said, when people are off with their timing, especially with the remote collar, that can create a lot of issues. So I have them start no with pressure, like leash pressure, but we first teach the dog leash pressure first. So we rehearse it, practice it, then we'll integrate it into the system, and then practicing capturing. That's it. So I say, okay, when your dog does something that you like in the house, doesn't matter what it is, the dog looks at you, the dog sits, the dog goes to its bed, whatever you like. When the dog does that behavior, say yes, and then enter some kind of reward event and practice different reward events. Practice different forms of delivery, the dynamics within the reward event. And then if you don't have any sort of boundary in your house, I want you to create a boundary for practice. Maybe now on the dog's not allowed in the office, or the dog's not allowed in the baby's room, or the dog's not allowed on a certain piece of furniture. And when the dog violates that boundary, you're going to use your marker that predicts negative reinforcement, leash pressure, and you're going to guide the dog off of the sofa or out of the room or whatever it is, and just work on that very simple basic skill. And people have been getting some really nice results because, again, it simplifies it. And it makes me think one of my other friends, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him or not, Austin. He has Zero to Hero dog training. And I'm going to be doing an interview with him as well. A really phenomenal trainer. One of the things that he'll have his clients do is practice communicating with the dogs without using any verbal. Not because they can't use verbal, but when they use verbal, sometimes they forget about the importance of physical. And he says, think about the physical. Think about how you're communicating with your physical body language to get the dogs to do the behavior. Are there any little techniques or strategies or things that are similar that you have your clients do?
So I do a thing where I get like a ball and I will give them a clicker, even if we're not using a clicker with their dog. And I will say I'll tell the spouse or whatever, when your spouse's hands touch that ball, I want you to click. And I'll get over here and I'll throw it to them, and we'll kind of do something back and forth like that. Um, I've gone as far with some people, like I told you earlier, like I'll put a slip lead on myself and I'll have them walk me, and because a lot of these people, like they can't like rub their head and pat their tummy at the same time, or multitask very well, and then they start with the dog and it's a train wreck, and now they're kind of introducing bad habits, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done that where they leave me around as a dog. I teach them how to use pressure. I teach them, the turning. Um, I've gone as far as like literally putting masking tape on the floor because I have some people that their dog like walks them around and pushes them and pulls them, and they don't even realize that they're doing that. So I'd say a
Mm.
little bit more focus on the physical side and the timing side of it by doing little games and stuff like that, and then introducing the dog. I've had good success with. I've shown them I'll show them exercises with spatial pressure, whatever you call it, like where
Mm.
they're struggling using luring to get their dog to sit from a down. And I'll just be like, all right, well, watch this. And I'll push the dog back into a sit from that. And, just like little things like that where they can kind of understand and see how pressure or being close or body language and timing influence the dog. You know what I'm saying? And I see it a lot where
Mm.
a dog will start rapping or forging or sitting crooked, and like they're just totally doing that with their body language and the way that they're stopping and the way that they're doing these things. So I do a lot of I'm the dog, you're the human, we're going to work on it. And I sometimes maybe I grab the leash too much too when they're struggling and just falling apart with the dog, and I'll say,
Mm.
let me see it, and I'll show you. um, but it's kind of a mix. It's kind of a mix of that stuff.
Those are some great exercises, and those are exercises that I'll do at my seminars as well, where I'll have the attendees at the seminar train me as the dog with the leash, with the remote collar, so they can get the timing down and at least get the timing down based on how I do it within my system. Because everyone does it a little different from other people. And another thing that you said is often, especially when we're new in dog training, we're doing things and we don't even realize that we're doing it, or we don't even realize that we're causing these problems. This is why I'm a true believer in champion study game footage. So I always encourage my clients and my students, film yourself while you're working with your dog and then review the footage. And when they're new at it, I tell them to watch it 3 times. First time, watch it, pay attention to yourself. Second time, watch it, pay attention to the dog. Third time, when you watch it, watch the whole picture. And this is going to make a massive difference. One of the most common that I see that people don't even realize that they're doing is the leash is constantly getting tight, loose,
Right.
tight, loose, tight, loose, and
Yep.
it's not signaling anything to the dog, and the dog's learning to ignore it. And
Mhm.
since we're talking about obedience, one of the most important things that I think a lot of dog trainers would agree on is the recall and getting a dog to come back when it really matters around any kind of distraction, dogs, squirrels, you name it. What's your step by step system for creating that kind of recall? How do you start and how do you proof it in the real world?
Well, generally, by the time I'm there, there's all these problems. People usually wait way too long. There's a history of blowing off recalls and it reinforcing, on chasing a squirrel or chasing a deer, and the dog's like, "Holy shit, that's way more fun than what you're offering me." So generally, the first thing I do, it's always on a leash, always on a long line, and we'll start in the living room. I will change their recall command. I don't even give them the option. I say, "What have you guys? What's your command for your recall?" And they'll say like, "Come," and I say, "All right, well, we're going to use the dog's name and then here." And um, basically, we do a game, we'll do the triangle, and then I'll show them how to practice it by themselves. And then I just don't let the dog not come. If the dog's not coming, I'm going to make them come. And it's a lot of reward, a lot of fun. And one thing that I see a lot is when I call the dog's like flying to me. And when they call the dog just kind of, okay, I guess I'll come because Uncle Steve's watching, and then they'll kind of trot over. So I kind of separate it. So I teach the recall. I call it the recall game, right? And I break that down step by step. The two most important things for me is not to repeat yourself, right? So you say it once, you give the dog a second or two. If they're not turning and coming to you, you grab the leash and you make them come to you. And then I teach them to spread out as if we're playing baseball and we're warming up our arms and catching before practice. We start close, we start to get further and further and further apart. But the key to this is that the dog can't blow you off because there's a long line, and I will make you come. And then I separate it into the human side where most people that I work with, they'll go, Fido, here. And I'm like, no, it's like Fido, here. Woo, come on, buddy, but and I immediately go. I always pair. I'll say the recall command, and then I do like I'll make high pitched noises, right? Like pop, pop,
Mm.
pop, 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 pop,
Yeah, yeah.
whatever it is. And then the dog's like, man, this is really fun. And then I introduce like sometimes they get one reward. Sometimes I'll make them chase me, and I'll make them miss the reward, and then I'll give them one, two, three, right? And then the next time they just get praise, and then the next time I'll give them 10 rewards, whatever it is. And then when the dog's like turning and flying and doing that, then we move outside and we kind of escalate through those environments like I described earlier. And at a certain point, um, with the clients that are okay with it, we introduce e-collar. And then we kind of go through a conditioning period or whatever you want to call it. We teach the dog e-collar. We teach them, hey, you're going to feel this weird sensation that doesn't exist anywhere else in nature, but it's low enough to where they can think through it, and then they can turn it off and they're in control of it because we pair it with commands. And when the dog does it, whatever, and then I'll fade the long line away. And at a certain point, we're going to use the e-collar for real. And I use the e-collar on a higher level, right out of the gate, after the intro period, if you want to call it that. And then we just go places. We go places where I think there's going to be animals or where I think there's going to be other stuff. I have a cattle dog client, and the lady's retired and she doesn't have kids and she's on like her third package. Man, you should see this lady. She shows up, she's got her treat bag, she's got her ball in her pocket. She's just dialed, man. And she's just like, I don't have kids. This is my kid. And like, I love this. I look forward to training days. We're just going to keep going. And this dog, his name's Patch, and he spent 8 years. He was 8 years old when she got him. He lived in somebody's backyard for 8 years and never got like properly socialized or introduced into the world. She's one of the ones that got dragged down by this dog, and almost, I don't know how she didn't hurt herself. And it happened more than once. And now we're off leash healing around the outskirts of the dog park. Our last lesson was last week, and she lives on a golf course, and one of her goals was to be able to go walk on the golf course once it closes. And it was cool to see the click happen in her brain because she still didn't trust
Mm.
the e-collar all the way. And I caught her kind of overusing it on a lower medium level and like using it a lot for healing. And I said, I don't want you to do that. I said, you're not doing obedience competitions. Like, what I want you to focus on is if you're recall, and if your dog doesn't recall, there's a consequence for that. So we went out to the golf course, we took off, and there was dogs over here, probably, I don't know, 70 yards away. Come on, get out from under there, buddy. 70 yards away. And they were on an invisible fence on this huge yard, two big dogs. So they come charging down the hill, barking, barking, barking. Patch took off, and I see her. She called him. She's tapping it. She's on like a 4 or a 5. I grabbed her collar and I went all the way up to a 10. And I said, Patch, here. And I held it down, and he went, and then he came running back. And then 2 more times on that walk, something similar happened, and he didn't do it. You know what I mean? And it finally clicked. I said, stop using it for every little thing. I told you not to do that. And you're using it on too low of a level. And in my opinion, based off of hearing Ivan talk about this, hearing Armin talk about this, people that are actually you know what I'm saying, and listening to how dogs normalize, and if you're using it on a low level all the time, if they go into drive and they're taking off after something, like, it's just better to be on a higher level. And she saw that, and now she has complete confidence in it because he stopped on a dime, turned around, and came back, and he didn't do it again the rest of the walk.
So do you use it just as positive punishment? You don't use a remote collar at all as negative reinforcement?
Typically not, no. I use it to correct inaction for commands that the dog already knows. I see people doing different stuff with the e-collar and the APOPO people and this, that, and the other. And just from my lineage of people who do this stuff in the real world at the highest levels where there's high consequences for mistakes or the dog's not performing, um, that's the way that I've been taught and mentored by them. That's the way that I use it. Um, I'm not saying that the other stuff isn't cool. It doesn't work. I'm in my lane, and it's just kind of the way that I do it.
Now, you've made it clear that it's very important for the owners to understand and implement the training as well, so it sticks and holds with them. What are some of the most common mistakes that you've seen from the handlers when learning dog training?
One of the things that I see a lot is people repeating themselves a lot. Uh,
Mhm.
I, I'm kind of in that old school mentality of there's a time and a place for talking and baby talking and constantly talking to your dog. I see people that like overly talk to their dogs too much at the wrong times. And when you have fearful dogs that aren't that are codependent, I think that that's a recipe for disaster. One other thing that I see kind of a lot is people that like I have a client. I was at their house today. They've got a 6 7 month old boykin that has had zero socializing. They live way up on the mountain. They let it out the front door to pee and poop in the front yard, and then the dog will come right back inside, get on the couch, look you dead in the eyes, and pee and poo on the couch. And zero potty training. She's terrified of everything. She's borderline feral. And
Mm.
I was over there today, and I finally got her to where I could take the leash next to one of the owners on a walk, and she finally took food from my hand, and she was walking with me, and I started getting some engagement from her, and she's kind of clicking with me. And when we go back inside, I saw the shift happen in the dog. When we got to the front gate, she started pulling, and she's getting all erratic, and she's getting weird. She's trying to get in, and then as soon as she got in, she wouldn't take food from me. I would try and call her over to me, and she'd like look at the owner, look over here, or start doing that game like Cairo does sometimes when I tell him to kennel. He starts like looking like at the wall, like and I'm like, buddy, you do this every. But she, she's going over to the female and jumping up on her, and she's just stroking her and coddling her, and they let her go behind her when I'm calling them. And to me, I don't think that's conducive to a confident, independent dog. And I would definitely say those are a few things that I see on a daily basis for sure.
Rewarding unwanted behaviors unknowingly. That is a
Yeah,
big one for sure.
yes, that, and then the constant affection part.
Mm.
I would also say one thing that I see, and it's not from lack of me explaining this to people, because sometimes this is something that I need to work on. I'm very direct, and I can kind of be a dick sometimes. And I show up to a lesson, and the client doesn't have the pinch collar on the dog, and it's in the harness again, and I'm like, every time you show up, I tell you and I make you put the prong collar on, right? And that just shows me that they haven't been using it, and or the extra link or two is magically back in the pinch collar, right? People always think the collar's too tight when it's properly fit. And I'm like, no, it's fine. Or the biggest one is baby taps, baby taps when it's supposed to be a correction. And I'm like, you're going to make that collar mean nothing to that dog, and then you're going to have to go to a 200 instead of a 100 or an 80 for it to mean punishment to the dog. And one thing I catch myself saying every day is, if the dog doesn't view it as punishment, and I don't know if that's literaturally or Pavlov or whatever correct, but that helps them understand. All right, if I'm not doing this firm enough to where it's decreasing the actual chance of the behavior happening again, then I might as well not even do it.
Yeah, I call that a 25-cent speeding ticket.
Ah,
Get a
nice.
25-cent speeding ticket. You're probably going to
Yeah,
keep speeding.
I'm going to steal that one. I like that.
Now, you've interviewed some of the best trainers in the world on your podcast, Dogs of War. What qualities do you notice in the great ones that they all share, regardless of their training style or background?
They truly love dogs. Like, they truly love dogs. You watch them with their own dogs, and right, wrong, indifferent, failing at this sport, or like Ivan had the dog totally blew up on a track. They're not like mad at their dog. They're truly there because they enjoy being with dogs, and like they truly love their dogs. And then with that is the patience that comes with that. Um,
Mhm.
a lot of times. I don't know, and it's different because like Ivan, I have a hard time understanding him when he talks. Sometimes I have to like really sit there and not do anything else, and that's no bash on him. He's just got a really thick accent to me, and my hearing sucks and whatnot. But listening to Armin talk and explain things, it's crystal clear, and like he can break it down in ways. Every time I talk to him, it almost makes me feel stupid. Not because he's trying to make me feel stupid, but because I'm like just like, wow. And a lot of times, I would say brilliance in the basics, and then slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Getting really good at the little things, and then putting them all together. But most of them also are very studied, very accomplished in their respective disciplines, right? Because we all know people who are super famous on the internet, but they've never titled a dog, or they've never done X, Y, or Z. You know what I mean? And they claim to. And I just think the good ones and the ones that I trust, they can back it up, and they have a resume that you can see. They've got articles that were written 20 years ago that people are using now for their tracking program or their detection program, or just things like that. And I would have to definitely shout you out, Nate. I found you when Cairo was a puppy, and watching your videos with Ari and a lot of the stuff on your channel and your content. And I'm not just saying this. I don't blow smoke up people's butts, but was a very big help to me. And I'm very grateful to it, and I'm really digging watching your journey and kind of watching your growth as well. You're going to be one of those people to me, and to a lot of other people too.
I really appreciate that, brother. And you train with precision, patience, which is one of the biggest traits, I believe, as well, when it comes to making a successful dog trainer, and purpose. But what makes your work stand out is how you teach people to lead, not just command. For folks who want to follow your work or learn directly from you, where should they go?
You can find my business. It's called Oracle Canine Training. The website's oraclecaninetraining.com. Facebook, Oracle Canine Training. Instagram, Oracle Canine Training. Admittedly, I'm not the greatest when it comes to social media and doing that side of the business, but I still post on there quite a bit, success stories. And my podcast is called Dogs of War. I've been doing it for about 5 years. I've had a lot of people, including you, on the show, and a lot of veterans and a lot of canine handlers. It's a lot of war stories, canine handler stories, and with the emphasis of trauma and healing. So there's a lot of good dog stuff on there, and I would encourage you guys to find that. It's on all the platforms, Dogs of War. That's how you can
It's a great podcast. And I'll make sure to put all the links in the description. And for everyone else, it's not about fixing dogs, it's about forging teams. Thanks again for watching.
All right, so this is a song. It's a song about the veterans' struggle. I'm a musician. I live up in the mountains. I'm kind of isolated, so I don't have a full band. I also don't have a drum set or a bass, but I wrote this song, and I wrote the melody, I wrote the chord progressions, I wrote the lyrics, and I used some software to kind of put it all together and prompt it into the song that you guys are about to hear. And I hope you like it. It's about the veteran struggle and coming home, and kind of not me specifically, intentionally or anything, but there's a lot of veterans out there, and this kind of explains their journey, and it's called Halfway Home from Hell. I hope you guys enjoy it.
Came home breathing, but I ain't alright. Still sleep with my back to the wall at night. Desert in my head, fire in my chest. Can't tell peace from a combat stress. Try to quit the bottle, try to quit the pills, but pain don't listen to memories kill. Everyone cheers when your boots hit land, but they don't see the ghost gripping your hands. They call it coming home, but home's another fight. Every day's a battle just to make it through the night. I keep falling off the wagon, crawling call crying. Lost another last night. Another folded flag. Another mother held tight. We don't break 'cause we're weak. We break 'cause we fought and came home to a world that forgot what we bought. Wife whispers, baby, please stay with me. But I'm staring at the bottle like it sets me free. I don't wanna drown, I just wanna breathe. Sometimes the only quiet's when I'm on my knees. Hero on paper, ghost in real life. Trying to love my family while I fight for my own mind. I keep falling off the wagon, crawling back through pain. Desert storm running wild in my brain. Kids smiling in the sunlight. God, I wanna feel that light, but my soul still shakes like I'm gearing up to fight. They say I made it home. Nobody can tell. Feels like I left my heart halfway home from hell. I don't need a parade or a thank you line. Just one whole day where my head feels fine. One quiet breath without shaking hands. One damn sunrise where I feel like a man. Yeah, I relapse, I stumble, but I'm here in the fight. Some days breathing's the only win inside. If tomorrow don't break me, maybe dawn will heal. I'm wounded, but I'm walking, shaking, but real. They say I made it home. Maybe time will tell, but I'm still crawling up from halfway home from hell. Still here, still trying. Not clean, but not dying. Halfway home from hell. Halfway home from hell.